Okay, so today I'm going to show you how I make my rolled rim casseroles. I'm using the clay from Clay Art Center in Tacoma. It's called Darcy's with mica. It's a cone 04 clay, and it's I make this line of work called my peasant ware, which is left unglazed on the outside and a beautiful creamy yellow glaze on the inside. Recipes for the glaze and more information on firing this, that, and the others in my book, My Life as a Potter. But in the meantime, let me get on to showing you how I make these casseroles. Alright, so I'm making the casserole out of 3.5 pounds of clay, and then I'm going to use 2 pounds for the lid. I'm going to make this casserole with a bit more of a slightly rounded bottom as opposed to a flat bottom. I did have a few casseroles years back that had really large flat bottoms, and I had a couple of them crack in the oven, and so then I thought, well, why don't I just make the bottom slightly rounder, maybe less stress on it. And I've never had one crack since I changed the design. So when I'm working with this earthenware clay body, that's how I throw them. So there's my bottom. I've just pulled it across a bit there. Now I'm gonna pull up the walls. Really what I'm doing here is pretty much exactly the same as in the earlier video for the spout bowls. When I was making the serving bowl, I'm gonna do pretty much the same thing. I'm just gonna add an area to put a lid. So I'm doing my second pull. I'm curving it a little bit because that's the way I want the form to go. And now I'm going to roll that rim over. So once again, putting my finger on the outside where I want the rim to fold over. And as I mentioned before, don't be afraid to make a big, bold rim because it'll look better. And also you're going to have more room to make your well for the lid. So as I'm folding it over, and now I'm just like so, get a little bit more moisture, and now is the point where you need to compress to get the air out. So I have a little finger underneath, and I'm just sort of pulling it up a bit and pressing down at the same time, which is probably a little confusing for you, but there you go. I'm gonna get my super duper mud tool. Thanks, Michael. These are the best. And I'm just going to work down. And just take those rims out. And just keep going with the curve that I want. And now I'm going to go from the bottom. And I'm going to go upwards. And end at the top. There we go. So you can see that I've done that rounded bottom again. A nice gentle curve up. Now I'm going to put a little bit more moisture, and I'm going to just do the outside. First I'm going to make that nice line for when I'm going to glaze it. So where that edge is where the creamy interior glaze is gonna stop, and just having that nice sharp line makes it just so much easier when it comes to glazing. And now I'll do the tidying up of the outside. That's pretty good. Now for the well, for where you're gonna put your lid, I'm gonna do this in 2 stages. First, get your nice sponge, get everything ready, and I'm gonna use my finger to make the initial indentation. Now that would be good enough just as it is, but I kind of like to make a nice squared off edge for my lid. It also makes it easier when I'm glazing. Okay, so I'll make a nice flat spot. Now for the lid, well, if you have, you can see I've got it, it's on a bit of a 45-degree angle there. So it gives you a little bit of wiggle room when you go to make your lid as far as fitting. So I'm going to just do that like so. Clean that up. And I'm gonna take off any leftover lines on the inside with my other rib. Make it nice and smooth. And this is quite a slippy clay. So every time you go over, you're bound to get a little bit more coming off on your rib. Once again, because I'm gonna leave the outside unglazed, I'm gonna go over it one more time with this rib, just making sure everything's smooth and the line is just the way I want. So that's the bottom. And now we're gonna measure for the lid. I hope I have enough clay here. I grabbed 2 pounds for the lid and it's actually looking fairly wide. Well, we'll see how I go. There. So there I'm measuring that. Oh yeah, it should be good enough. Let's see. So with the lid, basically you're making like a saucer form. And depending on how domed you want the lid, like sometimes with a casserole you really want the lid to sort of like round up a bit. Sometimes you like it maybe not so rounded up. That design part starts right here on how you throw this, because we're basically throwing the lid upside down. So I'm gonna make this one fairly flat. I'm gonna flatten it out. There. There we go. Now at this point, I usually take my calipers and just get a little bead on how wide I need to go. Okay, so that's got lots to go. Just as if you were throwing a really shallow bowl, we're just gonna pull this slowly outwards. I need about a ½ inch on either side. And it's always better to err on the side of going a little bit too big, because you can always take a bit of clay off in the trimming stage, but you can't add it. So now is where I'm really thinking about the shape more, as well as the extra width. Okay, good. Let's see. Am I on? Oh my lord, I'm very close. Okay, just give it a little bit more. And I want to change the curve a little bit from what I had. So this is the time to do it. And spread it out a bit. I'm guessing that should be right on the money. Perfect. So now I want to make sure this rim is really nice and rounded over and smooth. And maybe just giving it a little tiny bit extra pressure, a little bit extra width, just in case, because like I said, you can't add, but you can take away. And I'm gonna also take the rings off on this, because I'm gonna glaze the inside of the lid. I'm just gonna go over it one last time. All done. So now these are gonna set up overnight, and then tomorrow I'm gonna flip this lid over, see if it fits that puppy, and trim it. But as you know, I was busy yesterday, and I have a casserole all ready to show you the next stage. So one moment. Alrighty, as promised, I have 2 casseroles. So this one was 3½ pounds wet, and the lid was 2 pounds. This one was 5 pounds wet, and the lid was 3 pounds. As you can see, I made this lid a little bit more domed, and this one a little bit more shallow. Now, I've already trimmed the bottoms of these, and you could put this on the wheel and trim the lid right as it is, placed on the casserole. And a lot of people do it that way, and I actually quite like doing it that way. I didn't learn that way. I only sort of came to that later in life. So why don't I show you how I used to do it, because it is a little easier and not quite as daunting if you're starting out. Okay. Oh, I love that. I just hit the center, just first go. It's the small things in life. There you go. So a little bit of water there. My lovely bison tools. Now when you're first starting to do lid, it takes quite a while before you start to get the hang of when the consistency of the lid is just right, and when you go to attach the knob it's not going to sink down. And really that's just something that takes time and observation. It's like Goldilocks. You don't want it too dry because then the knob's not going to adhere properly, and you don't want it too wet. You just want it just right. You notice I don't, when I'm doing this, I don't have my wheel going at the speed of light. Actually, even when I'm throwing, I don't have the wheel going at the speed of light. The only time the wheel is really going fast is when I'm centering the clay. I think that most potters, when they're beginning, have the wheels going a little bit too quickly, and that's why when you're trimming with the Giffen grip, you've got trimmings all over the floor. It's not so much the design of the grip, it's the speed of your wheel. Okay, so I think that's looking to be a pretty nice line. Let's do a good score. A little magic water. I don't know why they call it that. So now is when you find out if you've got the lid the right consistency, because if it's too soft, it starts to sink in. And if it's just right, it holds up. Oh, and this looks to be just right. Thank goodness. Can you believe that's going to turn into a knob? When I'm first doing this, I'm kind of pressing down with this finger. This is an important part of the process, making sure it's really nicely pressed down there. Then I move my attention to the top part, and I'm also now, my fingers are these fingers holding the position because I want the knob to go up, and then I make my little point. And that's pretty much it. Now I'll take my very dirty mud rib and smooth everything off. So now it's done. Generally now I would let this lid sit for, you know, a half an hour or so, and then bop it off the bat and put it on the casserole. And then it's done. But on the next casserole, why don't I show you how I would trim it on the casserole. So I'm showing you both. But we'll put that aside to just sit there and be happy. And I'll get my antique Giffen grip, which is one of the first ones they made. And look at it, it's still in play. There we go, we've got the casserole on board. And now we're gonna trim the lid in place. Now the nice part about this is, you know, the lid is fitting perfectly and hasn't stretched at all through the trimming process. One of the more challenging parts at times I found is sometimes that the lid will stick a bit to the rim. So sometimes when I'm doing this, if I think I'm gonna be using a lot of water, I'll put a couple of pieces of Kleenex something there underneath, just so that it's not going to seal up. And really, I don't know why I didn't do that this way when I was younger, because in a lot of ways it's easier. However, sometimes I'm slow to get to things. So at this point, you can take a brush to get the little bits and bobs out of the well there if you want. Tidy it up. If you notice that while you're trimming this is feeling a little soft, you could leave it to set up a bit before you put your knob on. I think this is pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the knob on. Tell this lid is a little bit softer than the other one. Hopefully I don't get a little bit of cave in there, but if you do, after it's set up a little bit and you take the lid off, just put your finger underneath and poke it back up. It's not looking quite as smooth as the last knob, is it? I got a funny little bump there, so I'm just gonna press it down a little bit. Working away that little weird bit. Making my little pointy top. I don't know why I like those pointy tops so much, but I do. And there we go. All done.